Alright, this is going to be more of a risky video. I wanted to talk a bit about music and videos, actually. So, there is a there's a lot of moral arguments you can make, right, about piracy being ethical, but I'm going to come at it from a more practical standpoint as somebody that collects music. This is my Metallica folder. That's what's being displayed right now. Now, a lot of these albums, you can't get these versions by buying them. So, a quick example, right? So, I think Hardwired to Self-Destruct is from a CD. I'm actually going to tell you a funny story about this one too. So, if you're a moral busybody, this is probably going to piss you off, but I did this more as a joke when I was a kid. And what I did was, so Metallica's got kind of a thing against piracy, right? They were big against LimeWire. They would sue bands, and actually, Beatallica got caught under the crossfire of their record label, which Beatallica, if you've never heard of them, are a uh, Metallica style band that plays Beatles covers. They're the most hilarious band ever. They're great. I've seen them in concert with Oakley Dokley, and I got a patch from them and guitar pick, I think. They're really cool stickers and all that. So they proudly sport a place on my battle jacket. But what Metallica did was they actually sued them, and then I think Lars had to come out and get the record company to stop suing them for copyright infringement. Because obviously it was fair. And we're gonna talk a bit about that. But basically, since they were so anti-piracy, I said, well, I can, if you want me to not pirate, I can go the other route, which is what would happen if piracy wasn't a thing. I will go out and just steal your album. So I went out to a store and just grabbed a copy, and nobody gave a shit. But like I said, if you're a moral busybody, that's usually people say, oh, now you're unethical, and I'm like, get fucked. It's fucking, it's a mega fucking retail chain, and it's Metallica. They're not fucking losing money on this bullshit. Uh, but anyways, that was the argument I was making was, well, if you don't want piracy, then get ready for people to just straight up shoplift your albums, you know. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're not going to talk about actual thievery. Instead, we're going to tackle piracy from a perspective of um, you are probably missing out on things if you don't pirate. So I'm gonna go through this folder again, right? So a lot of these were CDs I actually owned, but these that are numbered by year are ones that I had to download. And I used to own all of these copies on CD, but I ended up selling my collection. But a lot of these are just CD rips I had lying around. These, however, are redone, and that is what this little tone graph is for, is because Metallica was caught up in what's called the loudness wars, which around the 90s was where, especially with dance music, a lot of waveforms were like fucking brick walls. And it was because you needed to play music really fucking loud on speakers that really fucking sucked. This is why a lot of hip hop music was very bass boosted, is because it was meant to be played on like boom boxes, which basically had bass and nothing else, or car stereos, which are all subwoofer, you know. And Metallica had the same problem. Whoever they had mastering their albums, when they did remasters of them, they all had these fucking fuck huge brick wall waveforms, and they sound like shit. So what somebody did was they actually went through all these albums and they made them really fucking quiet. And what that did was you have to turn your amp way up to hear them, but because of that, the volume scales a lot better, and you end up with a much better sound because of it, a lot better dynamic range. And if you are not pirating these albums, if you actually go out and buy them, you're not getting that. You are instead getting the shitty version of it, which brings me to Death Magnetic Guitar Hero 3 Rip. So Death Magnetic CD was notorious for the loudness wars. A lot of people fucking hated it because it sounded really distorted. It sounded like it had a lot of clipping, you know, and it just played like shit. It got rid of all the dynamic range. And it just sounded really bad. But this was also Metallica after they're good albums, debatably good. So, anyways, they had a specific version made for Guitar Hero 3 though, and if you went into the game's files, you could actually rip the proper mastering of the sound of the entire album, which was very interesting because there was no way to get it other than to rip it from a disc and know your way around an Xbox 360 disc. So somebody, of course, uploaded the FLAC, and you're able to download it. You can find it wherever. Somebody's got a copy of it, but that's something that you're not going to get if you're again buying these albums. And we're going to talk a bit about vinyl because that's another thing I have a sizable collection of. Even though I sold my record collection, I ended up buying some of the vinyl that I liked, records, LPs. And I try not to buy new ones. The only one I have that's a new pressing is Pink Floyd Wish You Were Here, and that's because it's just really hard to find a good copy at a reasonable price, and I don't really give a shit enough about about my record player to care about which pressing it is. But usually I try to go for old pressings, ones that were made like in the 70s or 80s, or you know because they have the real sound. New records are the digital masters on a right, or on a on wax, and it just doesn't sound the same. Even though the thing I really like about turntables is that you can tune the sound whichever way you want. Like your preamp makes a difference, your tone arm makes a difference, everything. Your receiver makes a difference, your speakers make a difference. And if you start downloading music, you're going to start getting into vinyl rips instead of CD rips, and you're going to start looking for those for albums you care about. So, like for my Pink Floyd folder, I've got 128 kilohertz like LP rips, and it'll show you exactly what equipment it was ripped on, and they're tuned very differently than the digital masters or the digital release, really. And because of that, you get a much different sound. But we're also going to talk a bit about bootlegs. So a bootleg is usually where somebody had gone to a show and recorded it on like a shitty tape recorder and then pressed it to an LP. And those records can go for a high price despite not being legitimate. When I was looking, I was selling one of them recently, and it was a Terrence and the Tightwire, and it's worth like $400 because just nobody had it. It was a bootleg, and a lot of the Slayer albums I had were recorded from live shows and not ever released. But those are the best versions of the songs I could find. So when you start getting into live shows, you may have to start looking for bootleg albums. And to get back to Metallica though, because there was one I was going to talk about, was No Life Till Leather. And hopefully I have it. Yeah, No Life Till Leather. And it was released way back in the day as a demo before Kill 'Em All. But what happened was they also re-released it for Record Store Day, but only on cassette, and they're really hard to get. They were like $50 last time I checked. And I really can't be fucked ripping it, to a quality FLAC, so I just have somebody else do it for me. And as long as I've sold my cassette player, and I don't really listen to cassettes anymore. I had a few good albums on cassette that were really hard to find. But this one specifically, I just downloaded a FLAC rip of it, and you're going to miss out on that if you want to hear early Metallica, If you want to hear them before Kill 'Em All, you gotta go find a copy of it. And somebody's got it for you. But Metallica is my prime example of music, or of bands that you really need to fucking pirate, because you just get objectively better versions. And to get into videos, one of my favorite examples is the 4K remaster of, like a fan remaster of 2001: A Space Odyssey, as well as Joker Regraded. So regrading films is where you like you can take out some of the color, you can mess with it a bit, and basically try to make the film look differently. And that's called a regrade. So like Joker in particular had a very green filter all over everything. And you see the same thing in game modding, is like, especially when the piss filter was a big thing, like in Fallout New Vegas and other shooters of that time. You get a much better visual if you remove that filter. And you can do that through stuff like Reshade. So it's basically the same thing, but for movies. And again, if you paid for the movie, you missed out, you know? But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today is just like if you're not, if you have moral qualms about piracy, there is a practical reason for it too, where just you're missing out on a whole ton of fan made content. I'm gonna bring up one more album, which is actually kind of hard to find now, but there is a Reddit thread if you can find it to a Google Drive link, and it was for Corellia's album that they put out. So if you've never heard of Corellia, I actually originally got their album from a promotion from the Pirate Bay back when that was the thing. They used to do promotions where they would give you free stuff, like they were giving out a download for the game McPixel, and I just randomly downloaded that Corellia album or LP. No, it was an EP at the time, and it only had like 3 songs, but it was like the best demo I've ever heard. And they raised a shit ton of money on Kickstarter because of that, because they gave that demo out for free. And it took them like 8 years or so to make the album. They were like really anal about mastering. They wanted it to be just as good. And when the master came out, it was garbage. But there was an early AI, and I forget what it was called, Lander, Landr, and somebody ran it through an AI, and it came out a lot better than the actual master. And if you bought the album, a lot of people really fucking hated it. But if you pirated the Lander remaster, you got a much better copy of the album, and you didn't have to pay for it. So like, while I've got a Bandcamp account. I buy albums from bands that I actually give a shit about, and I want their music because Bandcamp adds a lot of convenience for me, where I don't have to back up everything on a drive. I can just download it anytime I need it, which is cool. But there's a lot of these albums where you can't buy them in the quality I want, where I want the fan remasters, I want the fan edits, I want the regrading. And that's just something that you don't really get in when you're buying stuff, and that always pisses me off. You get the movies in a lower quality than you expected. You get the music in bad masters, you get the games, but they have shitty DRM in them. And I don't really pirate games anymore just because if I need a game, I can pay for it, but I don't really play many games these days. And the pirated ones, I mean, like, there's games update way too fucking often now, and I hated having to update games manually by downloading the update patch for them because, like, the game was fucking broken on launch. And I'm like, fuck it, I'll just fucking buy the game. I need the patches as they come out. And that's just something that with music you're not getting, where music doesn't really update, but you can get a much better experience if you download the music illegitimately, really. And that's kind of what I hate about it, is that we're not getting the quality products that we're expecting. So people have to resort to, and it's going to be the same thing in software. Is that as software gets worse, you're going to see more Windows Ameliorated Edition or Windows Defucked Up Edition, or LTSC, where you have to have a fucking, whatever it's called, a volume license, and you have to like pay a outrageous subscription to get access to it. Well, people are going to start pirating it because that's the good version of Windows. And I feel like if you do have major ethical qualms about piracy, you are missing out. There is a whole world of stuff out there that you could be using. You could be listening to, you could be watching, and you're not because you paid for it. But that's really about it. Thanks. Oh, and if this video gets fucked up on YouTube, I will. This is me really towing the line. This is something I should have uploaded to another platform, but I'm still kind of here for now.